We lock up a few people and we call them evil, we call them monsters, we call them the psychopaths of within us, the killers within us, the serial killers, the ones who are like the wolves within us, sheeps, and we love to categorize them because we don't want to keep them in the same category as us. I'm talking about psychopaths. I'm talking about the monsters you have within you and have you have categorized them. And my questions are that if you have categorized them already, then have you asked enough questions before categorizing them? Because whenever you say the term monster, evil, or a psychopath, you usually want to put them in a different bucket so that you are safe. You sort of want to satisfy yourself that I can never do these kind of things. I can never be involved in these kind of situations. Like these guys are just crazy. They might have something genetically wrong. They might have their brains messed up or something along those lines. You just want to avoid yourself and the consequences that maybe you could do this someday, or maybe you could have been this. You just want to avoid these questions. Now, it's not only related to this psychopaths and the moral questions, it has been something within the human nature all along the way. Now, sometimes you had interspecies discrimination, then you had intraspecies discrimination, then you had religious discrimination in the intraspecies way. So it's weird. It's weird that we always want to create buckets and just baselessly categorize people. Now, even though we have a legal system to do all of these things, a jurisdiction to do all of these things in a particular way, but still, it just doesn't sit right with me because I want to ask enough questions. Now, do you know, if I put you through the same thing, how a terrorist kid was put through, you might be even turn out as a terrorist. You might even do a very horrific event that you say no to right now. I was just afraid that you might do the same thing if you were in their place, if you went through each and everything they did, and that's why you just want to quietly categorize them and push them aside. The next step that you want to do after categorizing them and after putting them into a different bucket is that you want to burn that bucket off. You want to burn that list. You just want to eliminate them, finish them, give them the punishment and move on. See, the thing is, you don't care about righteousness. You don't care about true justification or true justice. All you want is to avoid yourself from ever being involved in these situations. You don't want to ask the questions enough that what led to this situation, what led to this horrific event, what led to this human being this horrific. The point is, instead of categorizing them as monster, why not let's ask a question that why are they a monster? Why make them a monster? What made them a monster? And why did they do these things? So coming out of the comfortable lie, now we start to ask the questions that what made them, and that's how we enter the making of a monster. What created them? The biggest part is the ACE, the adverse childhood extremities, the experiences that happened when you were a kid. Many times, and due to actually clinical researches, now we are able to find out that these psychopaths and these horrific monsters actually face a lot of childhood trauma. Now, childhood trauma is directly proportional to how violent your behavior would be in some situations. And so it directly justifies that if you had similar kind of events happen to you within your childhood, you had the same level of trauma, maybe you would have done the same things that the monster has done. Then you won't be able to categorize them. You are the same skin, you are the same breed, you are the same species. The second part is the attachment theory. Now, attachment theory is the most important one. Understand this. Whenever we empathize with something, the difference between us and sociopaths and psychopaths is that they don't empathize and have sympathy regarding things we have. So let's say someone cries in front of you. You feel sorry for them. You feel something related to them. You see the same emotions flowing through your head because you are connecting with them. You are attaching with them and you're sort of putting yourself in those situations and thinking like that. And that makes you sympathize. That makes you feel the empathy with that guy. Okay. But due to the attachment, if you lack attachment, you cannot have sympathy. That's the basic. The basic step is attachment. You feel attached to a particular guy and that's why you feel sympathized. Understand the basic stuff. Now, the attachment theory suggests that these psychopaths and sociopaths do not have attachment when they were kids. So in the childhood, when they were literally 1, 2, 3 years old, they had no significant attachment of any kind of love. They did not feel any kind of person who is spending the time with them. And that's what led them to feel less empathy later or feel completely no empathy regarding anything. So the difference between you and a psychopath is that you were given love. You were showed attachment. People cared about you when you were a kid. If they didn't, if they avoided you, if they ignored you, you would have been the same guy that you're trying to avoid and put into a different bucket and burn that list. Well, the point is that these sociopaths and psychopaths, due to the lack of attachment, they never feel the sympathy and empathy. And so how they look at emotions is like mathematical calculations. Like for plus, you will have a negative, division, multiplication. So for them, this is like a mathematical equation going in front of them instead of just a random emotional structure which you think directly happens. So when they see someone crying, they start to think, why is this guy crying? What's happening? This, that. So they go into the logical perspective instead of connecting with them and crying alongside with them or providing them a wet shoulder to cry on. That's not the thing. That's how you think because you have been attached to them. Psychopaths don't attach because they lack that attachment through their childhood. No one provided them that attachment so that they don't have a feeling. They don't know what an attachment is. Another thing is the abuse cycle. Now, whenever a child during his initial years of life is exposed to continuous violent abuse day to day, again and again, whether it be to him, whether it be to someone who he is attached to, always responses out in future, in adulthood, with him being violent and him having the same tendencies to react in that way. And neglect versus abuse. Okay, neglect is very dangerous than abuse. You might think abuse is very dangerous, like someone beating up is very dangerous. No. Someone actually neglects you throughout your childhood is way more dangerous. Because think about it. The absence of caring, the absence of love, the absence of emotions given to you actually kind of depletes the development a human needs to develop that emotionally complex structure it has, like us. Like how someone cries and you start to cry along with them. You see an emotional scene and you start to wipe your nose. That's because you have that sort of structure developed when you were a kid. Your parents took well care of you. And that's what I say. If I leave you when you were a small little kid, 2 months old, if I leave you in a terrorist camp, you would turn out to be a terrorist. There's no objection in that. There's no question in that. That's how you will be. Now, let me give you a few examples. 90% of the death row inmates, those people who are literally going to die and are sitting on the death rows, well, they have already faced severe childhood trauma, a very severe childhood trauma. And you might think that 90% is just a coincidence. No, it cannot be. It's a correlation at this point. That 90% have faced something during their childhood. Some kind of a trauma, some kind of a violent behavior is still connected to their childhood. So childhood is actually that emotionally developing phase. And for me, childhood is really important because a kid literally picks up a new language and adapts to it, which is very, very sort of fascinating for me. That a small little kid adapts to each and every little tone you have in your language, each and every way you speak, the facial expression, it connects everything, it calibrates. So as I say it again and again, every human you think is dumb is still intelligent because they are still able to learn and adapt to have humans interact. These guys don't have that luxury. These guys are neglected. They're not taught. They're not acted well upon when around. You still remember those days when your parents used to fight and they used to go away or you keep you away so that you don't hear to those things? Well, here they are being fought with. Children who witness domestic violence are 74% more likely to commit violent crimes. So the question I'm asking is, if I put you through the same things, if I put you through the same chain of events, would you be the same as that monster you are trying to avoid being, or trying to just directly give them or sentence them on a death row? Exposed to violence by age 5 creates measurable change in the brain structure. And so your brain is literally physically altered at a very young age. Now, we'll understand about the gray areas or where the gray matter lacks or your amygdala and its responses, how it affects how your empathy and sympathy would be, how much you would attach to people. Let me give you a case study. We have a beautiful case study of the neglected child. Child is born, no genetic anomalies, okay? Normal brain, normal kid, beautiful, healthy kid, okay? Just like you have, you were a baby, day or 2 day born. Parents are absent, physically and emotionally, or either ways. No secure attachment forms in critical window, which is 0 to 3 years of your life. So when you are actually developing, you don't have a secure attachment form. Usually kids get attached to their moms and their parents a lot. But here, there is no one to attach them, neither emotionally nor physically. Empathy requires modeling. No model means actually no development. Child grows, becomes an adolescent, brain never learned to feel what others feel. Because you did not have that attachment taught to you within those 0 to 3 years, now you don't know how to attach. Now you don't know how to feel the emotions the other one is feeling because you're neglected. And that's how actually they start to decrease and start to desympathize with the emotional structures around them. So someone can cry and they'll be like, why the hell are they crying? You know that typical movie scene where the psychopath acts in a psychopathic way? Well, that happens because the attachment theory. They did not get that attachment when they were a kid. They did not get any emotional or physical attention by their parents, no care taken. Now they do something terrible. We call them a monster and we obviously put an end to them. But all of this was literally just within those critical window of 0 to 3 years. The kid had to just grow with attachments, with people around them. That's it. But no. So why don't we ask the question that what made these guys a monster? And almost excuse this question and not be accountable to it and just directly fall to a conclusion that these are the monsters within us and we need to finish them, we need to eliminate them. Let's understand the biological example, what you were trying to say that these are just, they have messed up brains. Well, they have. But still the question is, what if you had the same messed up brain? Prefrontal cortex damage, the area responsible for emotional and impulse and empathy and moral reasoning damaged. So our emotional reasoning and your emotional behavior is quite different to how normal humans would have. Amygdala, obviously. The one that actually creates responses, fear, aggression is obviously messed up in that. The amygdala is the prime source of how a psychopath is. Another thing, which is the warrior gene, MAOA. Okay, now when MAOA, the warrior gene, is found, and plus you had a violent childhood to begin with, that creates psychopathic nature, literally. So significant higher rates of violent behavior is because you have low MOAA activity plus childhood abuse. So it's, I mean, something is, you have to understand the psychopathy is overrepresented in criminals, but all psychopaths do not turn out to be criminals. So it is that everybody thinks that psychopaths and sociopaths, they don't feel emotions, and so all they do is kill. No. How do I say this? Someone's brain activity is different. Someone is born with low gray matter in the brain. Someone has damaged emotional structure. Someone did not get the attention or the attachment they used to get, or the kids used to, or kids have to get. They did not get that. They did not get their parents' attachment. Their fear response is messed up. They were abused. Now, when you put them through a trial, when you put them on a death row, what are you actually putting on death row? Them, or all of the chain of events that happened which led to them? Now, you might think that, Aryan, but still, a human has their own brain, a human has their own free will, and they can act upon that. Well, now you're entering into the psycho-philosophical section, I would say. Okay, let's discuss about that. Okay, so you think that these guys had a sort of choice to make. Okay, well, there's a fact called as determinism and compatibilism. Okay, let's discuss one by one. Okay, determinism, every action is the result of prior causes. So a murderer's action, which you see today, well, if is a psychopath or a sociopath, he definitely does not feel the emotion of revenge a lot. So the murderer's action is practically all the genetical responses they had, all the actual biological responses they had, and maybe their childhood, so the environment, that led them to do this thing. Now, if I put you in the same situation, you might pretty much act the same. You might think, oh no, I have a free will, I would never do that. But you would, if I literally make you go through the same things they have gone through. So the point is, do we blame the chain of events or do we blame the person? That's the biggest question. Compatibilism, okay? Free will exists but operates with constraint. Question is whether some people are constrained, they never really had a choice. The constraints are so high. Like if your parents leave you and you don't have attachment, what are you supposed to say to that guy? Like, have free will, get some parents, get some attachment, try to talk to a few people, to a 3-year-old. So Robert Sapolsky, okay, the Harvard professor I studied human behavior and evolutionary behavior from, he had this book written that there's no free will, okay? He says that free will is an illusion and no one truly deserves the punishment, but it's just our way of creating safety among us, you know? So it's an only containment for safety. That's why we have punishments. Otherwise, everything you see has minimal to negligible free will. It's a chain of events. So what are you going to blame, the chain of events or the human? Doesn't. So judgment or the truth or the legality, everything stands on a very neutral basis if you think like that. And so you might think that it's so complex, but at the same point, it's so simple. Let me give you a line from Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is the best Russian novel writer. And his novels, like, oh my God, I forgot the name which I was reading, The Brothers from Karamazov, okay? Nothing is easier than to denounce the evildoer. Nothing is more difficult than to understand him. Understanding is harder than hating. We choose hating because understanding is harder. We directly want to categorize them, burn them off, do. Simple. We don't want to understand what led them to this situation. And how can we avoid the chain of events so that no one again goes through this process? Now, let me give you a very quick example of how society works. US spends $182 billion annually for incarceration, which is imprisonment. That's what's happening. $182 billion annually, by the way. This is what they do. So instead of solving the chain of events, we want them to stay in prison and make them learn something within the prison. Now, obviously, there are a few experiments I can show you, but there's no point in understanding those. The question is that if you've gone through the same thing, if you were traumatized enough, if you faced hunger when you were a child, if you faced attachment issues when you were a kid, when no one took care of you when you were a kid, would you turn out to be the same? Or would you turn out to be the guy you are fearing the most, the guy you want to categorize the most? Is the question. Like, I don't know how to put this together. But the monster was once a child. The child did not choose its brain. The child did not choose its parents. The child did not choose its environment. Somewhere along the way, the will built something. And the chain of events went in a way that now you call him evil. Now you call him that monster. And instead of asking, how could we stop this chain of events and break it in between, we destroy the end result and think that nothing happened. So that's not the way to stop the evil. That's the way to stop thinking that there is an evil, or there is thinking that there is a justice if there is someone who does such things. But actually, there's no justification you can give to me. I mean, it's a very mid question. I stand in between, because how can I say something? I always turn out to be the devil's advocate because I want to learn. I want to ask more questions. So before you say someone a psychopath, before you say someone that you are mad, you are this, you are that, you should be prisonated, this, that, just go through what their childhood was, how they became what they became. And obviously, due to the legalities, I'm not saying you to protect them with your life, but the basic understanding of why the human became the human you see today is something we all should have a little bit of understanding about. I'll leave you at that thought. I want you to think about this. Maybe have a chat with someone. Maybe think about it with one of your friends. I think that helps, human attachment. That's it. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave you to this question. I'll meet you in the next one. I'll take a leave. Bye.